Have you ever wondered what happens when arrogance collides with a reality it could never have predicted? This isn't just a story about a rude customer. It's a story about the hidden strength we carry inside us, and how a moment of profound humiliation can transform into an unforgettable display of power. It begins in a place of quiet ambition, in an elegant dining room, where the clinking of silverware is about to be shattered by the venom of cruel words. It ends with a single devastating revelation that will make one wealthy woman question everything she thought she knew about status power and the quiet girl she tried to break. Stay with me, because the truth of who owned that restaurant is a twist you won't see coming. The Gilded Spoon wasn't just a restaurant to Selene Miller. It was a sanctuary built of memories. Every corner held a ghost of her father, David. She could still see him standing by the pass, his chef's whites, immaculate, a kind smile creasing the corners of his eyes as he inspected a plate of his signature duck confit. He had poured his entire soul into the establishment, transforming it from a struggling bistro into a Michelin star contender, a jewel in the crown of New York's culinary scene. But David was gone now, taken by a sudden heart attack 6 months prior, leaving Selene at 26, with the crushing weight of his legacy. He also left her with his business partner, Robert Sterling, a man whose smile was as polished as his $1,000 shoes, and whose eyes held the cold calculus of a predator. Robert had been clear the restaurant was in debt, a fact he'd conveniently shielded from David. He advised Selene to sell to take a generous offer and walk away before she was buried in her father's financial mess. Selene, however, had her father's stubbornness. She found the ledgers. The debt was real, but it wasn't insurmountable. It was, however, the perfect leverage for someone who wanted to force a sale. She suspected Robert was orchestrating the whole thing, likely in collusion with a property developer. The Gilded Spoon occupied prime real estate on a coveted corner of the Upper East Side. It was worth more as a plot of land for a new glass and steel condominium than as a home for her father's dream. So Selene made a desperate, unconventional plan. She told Robert she would consider his offer, but she needed a month to understand the business. In reality, she was staging her own undercover operation. To truly understand the restaurant's weaknesses, its strengths, and the loyalty of its staff, she had to become part of it from the ground up. She tied her honey blonde hair back into a severe bun, traded her tailored blazers for a simple black uniform, and became a waitress. Only Maria, the stoic and fiercely loyal manager who had worked with her father for 20 years, knew the truth. "Are you sure about this, honey?" Maria had asked, her brow furrowed with concern, as she handed Selene her apron. "These floors are unforgiving, and the customers, some of them can be cruel. I need to know what's really happening here." "Maria," Selene had replied, her voice firm despite the tremor in her hands. "I need to hear what the staff says when they think the owner isn't listening. I need to feel what it's like. Dad always said, you can't lead a team if you've never walked in their shoes." Her first week was a trial by fire. She learned the dizzying dance of service, the precise angle at which to pour wine, the art of carrying 3 hot plates, at once the forced smile when a customer was needlessly difficult. She was clumsy at first, earning a few sharp rebukes from the head chef, but she was a quick study. She listened to the kitchen gossip the waiters' complaints about dwindling tips and the hushed conversations about the restaurant's uncertain future. It all fueled the fire in her gut. She would not let her father's legacy be dismantled and sold for parts. On this particular Friday evening, the restaurant was buzzing. A crisp autumn air swept through the city, and the warm, inviting glow of the Gilded Spoon beckoned to the city's elite. Selene moved through the tables, her muscles aching, but her resolve firm. She was refilling a water glass when the front door opened, and a chill entirely unrelated to the weather seemed to follow the two new arrivals. The woman who entered was the kind of person who didn't just walk into a room, but made an entrance. She was probably in her late 50s, impeccably dressed in a Chanel tweed suit, her silver hair coiffed into a perfect helmet. A large, ostentatious diamond necklace glittered at her throat. Behind her trailed a younger man, likely her son, whose handsome face was set in a permanent expression of weary resignation. "Reservation for Davenport," the woman announced to the host, her voice sharp and loud enough to turn a few heads. She didn't wait for a response, her eyes already scanning the room with a look of undisguised disdain, as if she were a queen inspecting the squalid quarters of her peasants. The host, a young man named Ben, fumbled for a moment. "Of course, Mrs. Davenport, right this way." As they were led to their table, one of the best in the house, a plush corner booth, Selena felt a knot of dread tighten in her stomach. The woman was Catherine Davenport, the infamous real estate mogul, known in the industry as the Shark. Her face was a regular in Forbes and the Society pages, and as Selene's research had revealed, she was the CEO of Davenport Properties, the very company that had made an aggressive lowball offer to buy out the Gilded Spoon. This wasn't a coincidence. Catherine Davenport was here for a reason. And as she was seated in Selene's section, Selena knew this night was about to become the ultimate test. Catherine Davenport settled into the booth, her movements sharp and critical. She ran a manicured finger along the polished mahogany table, checking for dust, then eyed the silverware with suspicion. Her son Leo sank into the seat opposite her, offering Selene a brief apologetic smile as he did so. "Good evening. My name is Selene, and I'll be your server tonight. Can I start you with some water? We have sparkling or still." Selene began, her voice calm and professional, betraying none of the turmoil within. Catherine didn't look at her. She was too busy inspecting the water glass, holding it up to the light. "Is your still water flown in from a Fijian spring or simply filtered from the Hudson?" she asked, her tone dripping with condescension. "It's triple-filtered municipal water, ma'am, chilled and served with a choice of lemon or lime," Selene replied evenly. "How quaint. I suppose that will have to do. Sparkling. And bring a bottle of the Sancerre, the 2019 Domaine Vacheron. I trust you haven't stored it next to the boiler." "Of course not, ma'am. An excellent choice," Selene said, making a note on her pad. She turned to the son. "And for you, sir?" "Just the sparkling water for now, thank you," Leo said, his eyes darting towards his mother, silently pleading with her to de-escalate. He seemed to shrink under her powerful presence, a man in his late 20s, overshadowed by the force of nature that was his mother. As Selene walked away, she could hear Catherine's stage whisper. "Honestly, Leo, the service here has gone to the dogs. Look at her uniform. It's practically threadbare. David Miller would be turning in his grave." Selena's hands tightened into fists at her side, but she took a deep breath and continued to the bar. Maria caught her eye, a look of sympathy on her face. "Davenport's table," she mouthed. Selene gave a slight grim nod. Maria knew Catherine by reputation, a notoriously difficult customer who seemed to delight in tormenting service staff. When Selene returned with the wine and presented the bottle, Catherine snatched it from her hands. "Let me see that. I want to ensure you didn't bring me some cheap imitation." She scrutinized the label before giving a curt nod. "Fine. Open it." Selene expertly uncorked the bottle, her hands steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. She poured a small amount for Catherine to taste. Catherine swirled the liquid, sniffed it with an exaggerated air of a connoisseur, and took a tiny sip. She held the wine in her mouth for a long moment before swallowing. "It's passable," she declared. "Barely. You poured a fraction too much for the tasting, a sign of an amateur." Selena simply inclined her head. "My apologies, ma'am. I'll be more careful." She filled their glasses and then stepped back. "Have you had a chance to look at the menu? The chef has prepared a wonderful seared scallop special with a saffron risotto tonight." Catherine scoffed, waving a dismissive hand at the menu. "I don't need suggestions from the help. I've dined in every 3-star Michelin restaurant from Paris to Tokyo. I know what good food is. This menu is predictable, stagnant. It's as if David Miller's creativity died with him." The barb struck Celine with the force of a physical blow. It was a direct, cruel attack on her father's memory. Leo flinched. "Mother, that's uncalled for." "I'm merely making an observation, Leo. Business is business. Sentimentality is a weakness." She snapped her cold eyes, finally locking on to Selene's. "We'll start with the steak tartare and the burrata. And I want the tartare prepared tableside. I want to see for myself that your kitchen isn't using substandard meat." "We don't typically offer tableside service for the tartare, ma'am, for quality control," Selene began. "Are you refusing a customer's request?" Catherine's voice dropped, becoming dangerously quiet. "Is that the policy in this failing establishment?" "To argue, make it happen." Selena held her gaze for a beat longer than was comfortable. "I will speak with the chef," she said, her voice tight. "I'm sure we can accommodate you." She retreated to the kitchen, her heart pounding. The chef, a fiery Frenchman named Julian, who had been her father's protégé, saw the look on her face. "Let me guess," he said, wiping his hands on his apron. "Table 7. The dragon lady. She wants the tartare tableside." Julian cursed under his breath in French. "She wants a show. She wants a reason to complain. This is not about the food, Selene." "Be careful." He began gathering the ingredients, his movements precise and angry. "For David, I will do it. But you tell that woman that Julian Dubois does not perform parlor tricks." Celine returned to the dining room with the cart, her hands trembling slightly as she began the meticulous process of preparing the raw beef, mincing the shallots and mixing in the capers, cornichons, and egg yolk. Catherine watched her every move like a hawk, offering a running commentary of criticism. "Your knife skills are clumsy. You're bruising the shallots. You've added a touch too much mustard. Is this your first day?" "I'm doing my best to prepare it to your specifications, ma'am," Selene said through gritted teeth. "Your best is rather pathetic," Catherine shot back. Leo looked utterly mortified. He opened his mouth to speak, but his mother silenced him with a glacial stare. When Selene finally plated the dish, Catherine stared at it for a long moment before taking a minuscule bite. She chewed slowly, her expression unreadable. "Well?" Leo asked, his voice strained. Catherine placed her fork down with a loud clink. "It's bland, utterly devoid of character, just as I expected." She pushed the plate away and looked directly at Selene. "Take it back, and take it off my bill." Selena felt a wave of helpless rage wash over her. The dish was perfect. Julian's recipe was legendary. This wasn't about the food. It was a calculated, cruel performance designed to humiliate and devalue everything her father had built. And Catherine Davenport was just getting started. The rest of the meal was a masterclass in psychological warfare. The burrata was too cold. The bread was not crusty enough. When the main courses arrived, a filet mignon for Catherine, ordered medium rare, then sent back because it was too red, and sent back again when it returned because it was now overcooked, and a simple pasta dish for Leo, which he ate in silence, refusing to meet Selene's eyes, The tension at the table was thick enough to cut with a steak knife. Catherine seemed to feed on it, her energy growing with every complaint, every dismissive wave of her hand. She spoke loudly, ensuring the nearby tables could hear her criticisms. The other diners shifted uncomfortably, their own quiet conversations faltering. The atmosphere of relaxed elegance, that was the Gilded Spoon's hallmark, was curdling into a spectacle of public humiliation. Celine maintained her composure, a mask of professional neutrality firmly in place. Inside, however, a storm was raging. Each insult to the restaurant felt like a personal attack, a desecration of her father's memory. She was no longer just an undercover owner. She was a daughter defending her home. She could feel the pitying looks from other staff members and the sympathetic glances from patrons at other tables. It was galling. The final act began when Celine arrived to clear the main course plates. Catherine had barely touched her twice-recooked steak. As Celine reached for the plate, Catherine shifted deliberately, knocking her full glass of expensive Sancerre directly onto Celine's crisp white apron and down the front of her black trousers. The cold liquid soaked through, instantly clinging to her skin. The shock of it, combined with the sheer audacity of the act, made her gasp. "Oh, you clumsy girl," Catherine exclaimed, her voice dripping with false concern. "Look what you've done. You've ruined my evening and your own uniform. You are utterly incompetent." Leo shot to his feet. "Mother, that was not her fault I saw you. You knocked that over on purpose." "Don't be ridiculous, Leo," Catherine said, waving him away. The girl was careless. She probably expects me to pay for her dry cleaning now. Celine stood frozen for a moment, the cold wine seeping into her clothes, the murmurs from the surrounding tables buzzing in her ears. The public accusation, the blatant lie, it was the final straw. The carefully constructed dam of her composure finally broke. But she didn't cry. She didn't shout. A strange, chilling calm settled over her. She slowly placed the plates she was holding back onto the table. She looked down at the dark red stain spreading across her apron, then slowly, deliberately met Catherine Davenport's smug gaze. "You're right," Celine said, her voice quiet, but carrying a new, unfamiliar weight that made Leo and even Catherine pause. It was clumsy. This entire situation. She began to unfasten the strings of her stained apron. "What do you think you're doing?" Catherine snapped. "Go and clean yourself up, and send the manager over here. I have a great deal to say about the lamentable quality of your service." "I don't think that will be necessary," Celine said, folding the soiled apron and placing it on the edge of the service cart. "Because I agree with you. The service I've received at this table tonight has been absolutely unacceptable." Catherine blinked, taken aback by the shift in Celine's tone. The subservience was gone, replaced by an unnerving and defiant stillness. "I demand to speak to your manager," Catherine repeated, her voice rising. "And then I want to speak to the owner of this establishment. I'm going to make sure you are fired. A girl like you with no grace, no skill, and no future has no place in a restaurant of this caliber. You are worthless." The word hung in the air, ugly and final. Worthless. It was the same word Robert Sterling had used to describe her father's business acumen after his death. It was the word she had fought against every single day since she'd taken on this impossible task. Celine's expression hardened, but her voice remained steady. "You want to speak to the owner?" she asked, a dangerous glint in her eyes. "You've been speaking to her all night." A confused silence fell over the table. Catherine stared at her, a flicker of uncertainty crossing her features for the first time. "What did you just say? Are you insane? Mother, let's just go," Leo pleaded, sensing the ground shifting beneath them. "Not until this insolent little waitress is put in her place," Catherine insisted. I will not be spoken to this way." Just then, a figure appeared at the edge of their booth, his face a mask of anxious bonhomie. It was Robert Sterling, dressed in a tailored Brioni suit, on his way to what he thought was a celebratory dinner meeting with his co-conspirator. "Catherine, darling." He began, his smile wide. He stopped short, taking in the scene, the spilled wine, Celine, standing without her apron, and the thunderous look on Catherine's face. "Is everything all right?" Catherine's triumphant smirk returned. She pointed a perfectly manicured finger at Celine. "Robert, perfect timing. I was just telling this girl that you and I will soon be the proud owners of this property. Do me a favor and start the transition now. Fire her. I want her thrown out on the street tonight." Robert Sterling's smile froze on his face. He looked from Catherine's smug, expectant expression to Selene's cold, unwavering stare. A bead of sweat trickled down his temple. The gears in his slick, opportunistic mind were grinding, trying to process a scene that made no sense. He saw Selena, the grieving daughter he'd dismissed as a naive girl, standing there not in tears, but in defiance. He saw Catherine, his powerful ally, pointing a finger at the one person who could detonate their entire scheme. "Robert, did you hear me?" Catherine prompted, her voice sharp with impatience. "Get rid of her." Robert swallowed hard. His gaze darted around the room, noticing the other patrons who were now openly staring, their dinners forgotten. He looked at Maria, the manager, who was standing a few feet away, with her arms crossed, her expression one of grim satisfaction. He was trapped. "Catherine," he said, his voice a strained whisper. "Perhaps we should discuss this in private." "There is nothing to discuss," Catherine declared haughtily. "This waitress has been the most incompetent, insolent server I have ever had the misfortune of encountering. She is a disgrace to this restaurant's name. Now fire her, or I will make sure the board of your own company hears about how you conduct business." Leo, who had been standing by in horrified silence, finally spoke up. "Mother, please just listen." "You stay out of this, Leo," she snapped. Robert closed his eyes for a brief second, as if bracing for impact. He knew there was no way out. The lie had run its course and was about to collide with a brutal public truth. He opened his eyes and looked at Catherine, his expression a mixture of panic and defeat. "I can't fire her," he said, the words barely audible. Catherine's eyes narrowed. "What do you mean you can't? Are you a partner in this establishment or not?" "Yes, I am," Robert stammered, his polished facade cracking under the pressure. "I'm the junior partner." He took a half-step back from the table, gesturing helplessly towards the young woman in the stained uniform. "Catherine, you need to understand. You're speaking to Celine Miller." The name didn't seem to register at first. Catherine just stared at him blankly. "Miller. Is she related to the old cook or something? I don't care about her pedigree. I want her gone." Robert ran a hand through his perfectly styled hair, messing it up for the first time in what was probably years. He looked at Selene, who simply watched him, her silence more powerful than any shout. The onus was on him to complete the detonation he had helped set up. "She's David Miller's daughter," he finally choked out. "She inherited his entire stake. Catherine, you've been speaking to the majority owner of the Gilded Spoon all evening." The silence that followed was absolute. It was as if all the air had been sucked out of the room. The ambient clatter of cutlery, the low hum of conversation, the distant sounds of the city, it all vanished. Catherine Davenport's face, a moment before, flushed with arrogant fury, went completely pale. The transformation was breathtaking. The color drained from her cheeks, leaving behind a pasty, slack-jawed mask of disbelief. Her eyes, which had been so full of fire and contempt, were now wide with dawning horror. Her mouth opened slightly, but no sound came out. She looked from Robert's panicked face to Selene's calm, resolute one, and back again. It was the look of a predator who, in the act of cornering her prey, suddenly realizes she has stumbled into the den of a much larger, more dangerous animal. Leo let out a soft groan and sank back into his seat, burying his face in his hands. Selene took a small step forward, her posture no longer that of a deferential waitress, but of a woman in complete command. She looked directly at Catherine, her voice clear and cutting through the suffocating silence. "Mrs. Davenport," she said, the honorific now sounding like an indictment. "You wanted to speak to the owner. You have my full attention." For a long moment, Catherine Davenport was utterly speechless. Her mind, usually so sharp and calculating, struggled to reconcile the two images, the worthless waitress she had spent the last 2 hours tormenting, and the powerful heiress who held the fate of her multi-million-dollar real estate deal in her hands. The cognitive dissonance was a palpable shock, short-circuiting her composure. You're lying," she finally whispered, the words lacking any of their earlier conviction. It was a desperate grasp at the reality she preferred. "This is some kind of sick joke." "Does it look like I'm joking?" Selene's voice was ice. She turned her steely gaze to Robert, who flinched as if he'd been struck. "Robert, why don't you confirm it for her? Tell Mrs. Davenport about the arrangement. Tell her how I needed a month to evaluate the business before considering your generous offer." Robert looked as if he wanted the floor to swallow him whole. "It's true, Catherine," he mumbled, avoiding her eyes. "Selene is the legal heir. She controls 55% of this company. She is the owner." The final confirmation seemed to land like a physical blow. Catherine swayed slightly, gripping the edge of the table for support. The other diners, who had been watching with rapt attention, began to murmur amongst themselves. The story was piecing itself together in their minds, and the villain of the piece was clear. Selene didn't give her a moment to recover. She pressed her advantage, her voice resonating with newfound authority. "You see, Mrs. Davenport, I had a theory. My father loved this restaurant. He poured his life into it. But after he died, his loyal partner here," she said, nodding sardonically at Robert, "suddenly told me it was a financial disaster on the brink of collapse. He told me my only option was to sell to your company, as it happens, for a fraction of what this property is worth." She took a step closer to the table, her eyes burning with intensity. "But I know my father, and I know his business, so I decided to find out for myself. I started working here on the floor to see what was really going on. And tonight you've shown me everything I need to see." She paused, letting the weight of her words settle in. "You didn't come here tonight for a meal, did you? You came here to create a scene, to bully the staff, to complain about the food, to publicly denigrate this establishment. You came here to manufacture evidence that the Gilded Spoon was failing. You were trying to drive down its reputation to justify your predatory offer. You weren't a customer. You were a saboteur." Every word was a perfectly aimed dart, puncturing Catherine's inflated sense of self-importance. The accusation hung in the air, undeniable and devastatingly accurate. Catherine's face, which had been pale with shock, now began to flush with the deep red of humiliation. She was exposed, her ruthless tactics laid bare in a room full of her peers. Leo finally lifted his head from his hands. His face was a mask of shame and disgust, all of it directed at his mother. "Mother, is this true?" he asked, his voice cracking. Were you really doing that?" Catherine couldn't answer. She could only stare at Selene, this young woman she had so casually dismissed, who had just systematically dismantled her entire world in under 5 minutes. Selene wasn't finished. She turned her attention back to Robert. "And you, Robert, you fed her the information, didn't you? The doctored profit and loss statements, the exaggerated reports of staff turnover. You betrayed my father's trust. You betrayed his memory, all for a payout from your deal with her." Robert Sterling, the slick corporate raider, crumpled. "Selene, It wasn't like that." "Save it." Selena cut him off, her voice sharp as glass. "I have the real ledgers. I have my father's real books. And tomorrow morning, my lawyer will be filing an injunction against you for breach of fiduciary duty and attempted fraud. You will be removed from the board, and you will not see another penny from this company." Robert's face went ashen. His career, his reputation, it was all evaporating before his eyes. Finally, Selene turned back to Catherine, her expression no longer angry, but filled with a kind of weary pity. "You wanted me fired. You wanted me thrown out. Well, consider this my 2 weeks' notice. From this position, at least." She then raised her voice to address the entire dining room. "Ladies and gentlemen, my apologies for the disruption to your evening. There seems to have been a misunderstanding regarding the management of this establishment. Allow me to reintroduce myself. I am Selene Miller, David Miller's daughter, and the proud owner of the Gilded Spoon. And I can assure you we are not going anywhere." A stunned silence held for a beat, and then from a table in the corner, a man started to clap. He was followed by another, and then another, until the entire restaurant erupted in a wave of spontaneous applause. It was a resounding validation of Selene, of her father, and a public condemnation of the cruelty they had all just witnessed. Catherine Davenport stood frozen amidst the applause, the sound crashing over her like a tidal wave. She, who thrived on public admiration and fear, was now the object of public scorn. It was a humiliation more profound than any financial loss. She had been utterly, completely, and irrevocably defeated. The applause crashed over Catherine Davenport, not as a wave of validation, but as a deafening roar of judgment. Each clap was a hammer blow against the fragile shell of her authority. For a woman who had orchestrated her entire life to be the one observed with awe and envy, to suddenly become the object of public scorn, was a unique and terrifying form of annihilation. The faces around her, which she had previously dismissed as insignificant background scenery, now sharpened into a jury of her peers, their expressions ranging from pity to righteous contempt. The air, thick with the scent of expensive food, and her own humiliation seemed to crackle with her disgrace. Her hands, usually so steady when signing multi-million-dollar contracts, trembled uncontrollably as she fumbled for the clasp of her Hermes clutch. Her vision tunneled the warm, elegant lighting of the restaurant, searing her eyes. She had to get out. She couldn't breathe. Without a single glance at her son, the collateral damage of her failed campaign, she turned. It was not a dignified exit. It was a flight, a panicked scuttling from a battlefield where she had been spectacularly and publicly vanquished. She pushed past a bewildered Ben at the host stand, shoving the heavy oak door open and stumbling out into the unforgiving chill of the New York night, the sound of the applause chasing her down the street. Robert Sterling, ever the opportunist, saw his own escape window in Catherine's chaotic wake. His empire wasn't as vast as hers, but his reputation was his currency, and it had just been rendered worthless. He began to sidle away from the table, attempting to blend into the shadows, but a firm presence blocked his path. It was Maria, her stance as immovable as a mountain, her eyes, which had always been warm and maternal, now holding the cold fury of a guardian protecting her own. "The office, Robert," she said, her voice a low growl that promised retribution. Before he could be led away, Selene took a single step towards him. The anger she had held in check was gone, replaced by something far more chilling, a calm, surgical precision. "You will be hearing from my lawyer in the morning, Robert," she stated, her voice devoid of emotion. "He will have papers for you to sign. You will relinquish your shares, your title, and any claim you believe you have to my father's legacy. If you resist, I will not only sue you civilly, but I will present the evidence of your fraudulent accounting to the district attorney. I assure you the discovery process will be thorough." Robert's face, already ashen, turned a ghastly shade of grey. He opened his mouth, perhaps to plead or to threaten, but the words died in his throat. He saw no grieving, naive girl in front of him. He saw a queen who had just solidified her rule, and he had chosen the losing side. He gave a weak, pathetic nod and allowed Maria to steer him towards the back of the restaurant, a man walking towards the complete dismantling of his life. The drama had passed its peak, leaving a strange, vibrating silence in its wake. The diners who had been held captive by the spectacle slowly returned to their meals, but the atmosphere had irrevocably shifted. Conversations were now hushed, interspersed with furtive glances towards Selene's table. An elderly man in a tweed jacket, a patron who Selene remembered seeing with her father on several occasions, caught her eye from across the room and raised his wine glass in a silent, respectful toast. Selene acknowledged it with a small, grateful nod, the gesture a tiny anchor in the swirling sea of her emotions. Now only Leo remained an island of misery in the center of the room. He sat slumped in his seat, the picture of shame staring at the pristine white tablecloth as if it held the answers to the universe. The silence between him and Selene stretched thick and awkward. He was the son of the enemy, the namesake of the woman who had just tried to destroy everything Selene held dear. Finally, he looked up, his eyes meeting hers. They were clear blue and swimming with a profound, unfeigned remorse. "Ms. Miller," he began, his voice hoarse, and he had to stop to clear his throat. "There are no words. There's no apology that could possibly be adequate for what just happened, for what she did, for what she said to you." Selene remained standing, her arms crossed, a protective posture. She was exhausted, drained from the performance of a lifetime. Her instinct was to be wary, to see the trick in his words, to look for the hereditary cunning she now associated with the name Davenport. Leo seemed to sense her hesitation, and he pressed on his words, tumbling out in a rush of catharsis. "I am sorry. Not just a polite, I'm sorry. I am deeply, truly sorry for her cruelty. For the things she said about you, about your father. I'm sorry for her entitlement, for the way she treats people like they're pawns in her personal game. But most of all, I'm sorry that I sat here and let it go on for as long as it did. That quiet resignation, it's a form of cowardice. And I'm sorry for what she was planning to do to your father's memory." His sincerity was a disarming force. He wasn't making excuses for his mother. He was dissecting her behavior with a brutal honesty that could only come from years of first-hand observation. Selene's defensive posture softened slightly. She saw not an enemy, but another kind of victim of Catherine Davenport's toxic ambition. "My mother, she builds things," Leo continued, a bitter irony in his tone. "Skyscrapers, luxury condos. But her real talent is for demolition. She tears down relationships, reputations, legacies, anything that stands in the way of what she wants. I went into venture capital specifically to get away from that. I wanted to build things up, to invest in people's dreams, not pave them over." He ran a hand through his hair. "I focus on hospitality. I knew your father's reputation, of course. Chef David Miller was a giant. When my mother mentioned this underperforming restaurant on a prime corner, I never made the connection. That's my own ignorance, and I regret it. He leaned forward, his earnestness palpable. I want to fix this, not just for my own conscience, but because what she did was wrong on a fundamental business level as well as a human one. You said you have debts. That was their leverage. Let me offer you a different kind of leverage. Selene raised an eyebrow, her skepticism returning. A different kind of leverage from a Davenport. From a Davenport who is ashamed to be one tonight, he countered swiftly. My firm Sterling Point ventures no relation to Robert. I assure you we could offer a capital injection. Not a loan, an investment. Enough to wipe out your debt, to modernize the kitchen, to give the staff a raise to ensure the future of this place is secure. We would take a minority stake. You would retain complete control, creatively, operationally, in every way that matters. We invest in founders, Miss Miller, in leaders. And what I saw tonight, the grace under pressure, the brilliant strategy, the sheer guts it took to do what you did, that's a leader I want to back. The offer hung in the air between them, audacious and unbelievable. It was everything she needed, delivered from the one source she never would have trusted. Why? Selene asked the single word, carrying the weight of all her suspicion. Why would you do that? Guilt is a part of it, I won't lie, Leo admitted, but it's more than that. This is a good business. Your father built a phenomenal brand. It has legacy, it has loyalty. It just needs a shield to protect it from predators like my mother, and a little fuel to help it grow. This isn't charity. It's a sound investment in a proven concept and a brilliant new leader. He paused, his gaze unwavering. And yes, on a personal level, I want to be part of building something beautiful to counteract the ugliness I was a party to tonight. I want to help you prove her wrong. I want to see the Gilded Spoon not just survive, but become more successful than ever before, right here on this corner. Selene studied his face, searching for the lie, the angle. But she found none. She saw a man desperately trying to draw a line between himself and his family name, to build his own legacy out of different materials. She thought of her father, a man who believed in second chances and the good in people. It was a risk, but the last 6 months had been nothing but risks. Finally, she pulled out the chair opposite him and sat down, a gesture of concession and acceptance. I'll have my lawyer draft a non-disclosure agreement. If we're going to talk specifics, it will be done the right way. A wave of visible relief washed over Leo's face. Of course. Absolutely. Thank you. He looked down at the table, at the ruined meals, the symbol of the evening's conflict. He reached for his wallet. This is, well, the least I can do is... Selene raised a hand, stopping him. A small, tired smile touched her lips for the first time. Don't worry about it, Leo, she said, her voice regaining some of its warmth. She was no longer a waitress, but she was a hostess in her own home, and she was in charge. Tonight the owner has decided to comp your meal. 3 months later, the soul of the Gilded Spoon remained, but it was breathing a deeper, more confident air. The Friday evening service was in full swing, a symphony of controlled and joyful chaos. The changes were subtle but significant. The plush banquettes had been reupholstered in a deep sapphire velvet. The aged mahogany tables were polished to a mirror shine under the warm golden glow of new Art Deco light fixtures, and the walls now featured tasteful contemporary art from local New York artists, an initiative Selene had started. It was a space that didn't erase David Miller's classic touch, but confidently layered a new generation of style on top of it. Selena Miller moved through the dining room, not with the hurried, anxious steps of a waitress, but with the calm, purposeful grace of a general surveying a successful campaign. She wore a tailored charcoal grey blazer over a silk blouse, her hair now styled in soft waves that framed a face that had lost its youthful uncertainty and gained a quiet, formidable confidence. She paused at a table to chat with the Abernethys, a couple who had been dining here for 15 years, then shared a quick, knowing smile with Maria, who was overseeing the floor with renewed vigor. The oppressive cloud of impending failure had lifted, and the entire staff seemed to stand taller, their service more polished, and their smiles more genuine. She pushed through the swinging doors into the kitchen, a world of gleaming stainless steel, focused energy, and tantalizing aromas. The change here was even more pronounced. A state-of-the-art sous vide station bubbled away quietly in a corner, and a brand-new convection oven stood proudly in the main line. Chef Julian, his face flushed with the heat and the thrill of creation, was plating a dish with the intense focus of a surgeon. It was a new creation, pan-seared halibut, with a celeriac puree fennel confit and a citrus saffron reduction. "It looks incredible, Julian," Selene said, her voice easily carrying over the kitchen's clamour. Julian looked up, and his usually stern expression broke into a wide grin. It is a joy to cook in a kitchen where the equipment does not fight back. Selene, your father, he was a master of tradition, but with these tools, he gestured around the renovated space, we honor his tradition by taking it into the future. He carefully placed a microgreen on the fish. The critics from the Times are at table 12. They are loving the new tasting menu. "I have complete faith in you, chef," she replied warmly. "Just keep creating magic." This easy, respectful partnership was one of the greatest rewards of her new role. Julian no longer saw her merely as the boss's daughter. He saw her as a true collaborator, someone who understood the heart of the restaurant as well as he did. As she stepped out of the kitchen, she felt a profound sense of peace settle over her. She took a moment to stand by the service station, simply observing. She remembered the sheer terror of her first week, the burning humiliation of that night with the Davenports, the crushing weight of her father's legacy. It was once a burden that threatened to break her, but now it felt like a foundation upon which she was building something uniquely her own. She felt her father's presence, not as a ghost judging her every move, but as a warm hand on her shoulder, a proud whisper in the joyful hum of the dining room. The fates of her former antagonists served as a stark counterpoint to her own success. Robert Sterling's exit had been swift and brutal. In a sterile conference room, flanked by her formidable lawyer, Selene had watched him sign away his shares. He had attempted a final desperate plea, his polished veneer stripped away to reveal a weak, grasping man, but she had met his excuses with a silence that was more damning than any accusation. News travelled fast in their world. Robert was now a pariah, his reputation for treachery making him untouchable. Catherine Davenport's downfall was quieter, but in many ways more complete. Leo had told her about it in one of their weekly business meetings. There was no public scandal, but the whispers that emanated from that night at the Gilded Spoon were devastating. In a world built on image and influence, being the subject of a story where you are the cruel, out-of-touch villain was a social death sentence. Long-time associates suddenly became unavailable for lunch charity gala invitations, mysteriously stopped arriving, and the aura of fearsome respect she had cultivated for decades evaporated, replaced by a mixture of pity and contempt. She still had her fortune, but she had lost her power, which for Catherine was a far greater loss. A familiar voice cut through her reverie. I was told the owner might have a minute for her humble investor." Selina turned, a genuine smile lighting up her face. Leo Davenport stood there looking relaxed and comfortable in a well-fitted sports coat. The weary resignation he once wore like a second skin was gone, replaced by a light in his eyes that matched the restaurant's renewed vibrancy. "Only if he promises not to complain about the water," she teased. "Never again." He laughed, the inside joke a testament to the comfortable friendship that had grown alongside their professional partnership. "The place looks magnificent, Celine. The energy is electric." "We're having a good night," she said, her gaze sweeping the room with pride. "Profits are up 30% since the relaunch, and we're booked solid for the next 2 months." "I know. I saw the quarterly report," he said, his expression sincere. "But that's not what I'm talking about. It's more than just numbers. You've brought the heart back to this place. My team is calling this the smartest investment we've made all year." He led her to a small, unoccupied table near the bar, and they sat. "Speaking of my team," he said, his tone shifting slightly, "I had dinner with my mother last week. It was tense." "I can imagine," Celine said wryly. "She knows about my investment here. She called it a sentimental, foolish gesture, and a betrayal. She still doesn't understand," Leo said, shaking his head. "She can't comprehend that her actions had consequences beyond a failed real estate deal. She sees what you did as a personal attack, not the logical outcome of her own behavior. I'm sorry you have to be in the middle of that," Selene said, and she meant it. "Don't be," he replied firmly. "For the first time in my life, I'm on the right side of one of her battles. What I really wanted to say was, thank you." Celine looked at him confused. "For what you're the one who gave me the lifeline." "You took a chance on me," he clarified. "You had every reason in the world to despise my name, to throw my proposal back in my face. But you looked past the name and saw the intention. You gave me the opportunity to be part of this, to help build something positive. That means more than you know." They sat in a comfortable silence for a moment, the sounds of the thriving restaurant a warm backdrop. It was incredible to think that this easy rapport was forged in the crucible of such a humiliating and painful night. That night wasn't just a memory of spilled wine anymore. It was their origin story, a bizarre, fiery test that had revealed the true character of everyone involved. "My father always said," Selena began softly, "that the heat of the oven doesn't just cook the food, it reveals what it's made of. Some things burn, some things fall apart, but some things, they just get stronger." Leo smiled, understanding her completely. He was a wise man. "Yes," she said, her eyes glistening slightly. "He was?" She looked around the room again at the legacy he had built, and that she had saved, transformed, and now proudly called her own. The gilded spoon was secure. Her future was bright. She had faced down the sharks and had not only survived, she had created a sanctuary. And in doing so, she had finally, truly come home. Thank you for joining me on Selene's incredible journey. Her story is a powerful reminder that true wealth isn't measured by the price of your suit or the size of your bank account, but by the strength of your character and the courage to fight for what you believe in. It shows us that you should never ever judge someone by their position, because you never know the power they hold or the battles they are fighting. We've all felt underestimated at some point in our lives, and Selene's triumph is a victory for every one of us who has ever been dismissed or looked down upon. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button to let me know. Share it with someone who needs a reminder of their own inner strength. And most importantly, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next real-life story of drama justice and unexpected twists. What did you think of Catherine's ultimate downfall? Let me know in the comments below.